Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode...
Oh, man, here we go. I think it's 217.
217.
Yeah, 217.
If you're wondering what happened, I was looking at my phone.
I was trying to find the episode over there. Yeah. It was bound to happen, but at least he didn't say the wrong one.
True. But it's been a while.
Yeah.
Except, two episodes ago, I did.
Yeah, like I said, we need to have one of those things up that's like how many episodes since last mistake, like an OSHA violation thing, or workplace injuries. But anyways, we are having another level up review, and this is going to be a really good level up review. It's actually going to be really short and sweet because the book is really short and sweet, and it's one that I'd recommend everybody read because it's so short. You can literally read this in an hour. It does not take long. Which is kind of nice because our podcasts are that long, and we're going to give some depth and some discussion that I think is going to connect to reselling. But if you've just been hemming and hawing, this might be the book for you because we are reading Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah, and so you might have looked at this, and somebody actually hit me up in the DMs, go, yeah, this book is like, there's no profit in this book on FBA, but there's a lot of value to it. And I thought, yeah, it's very true. And, I was thinking about this today because... we don't get into the details of what's going on in the real world. We're kind of in our own, bunker reselling bubble here on Pure Hustle Podcast. But, the other day I was thinking about how life was before COVID, right? I mean, things reselling wise were just, steady. It wasn't like what it was or has been or continues to be. But I'm really, really missing those times, right? Just the normal things of like, hey, let's go to the movies. Let's go eat dinner. And now, granted, not everybody's in California like we are, right? But in California, we've been in the same place, I think, since March. I don't think much has changed. Actually, things have gotten worse as far as lockdowns go and as far as, there's been all this tension in our state. And, I was just, man, I really miss those times. And I don't think those times will be back at least anytime soon.
Or in the same way. And I think that's why a book like this is so beneficial because whether it's your business or personal life, Who Moved My Cheese is kind of a parable about dealing with change in your life. And so what I kind of want to start by just doing like a quick, 1 minute summary of it. And then we'll break down into the individual parts of like what it's about. But essentially, Who Moved My Cheese is a parable about 4 different individuals inside of a maze. And they every day get up and go, and they after finding a spot that had cheese, they go and they eat their cheese. And over time, the cheese ends up disappearing and it is no longer where they're used to finding it. And the characters all respond a little differently. And so 2 of the characters, which are mice, actually, as soon as they notice the cheese is gone, they actually kind of noticed it was starting to diminish over time. They leave, they go, and they quickly find more cheese. And the other 2 characters, which are him and Ha, they're
like little humans.
Yeah, they're like little people,
like Fisher Price little people
with more complex brains. And I think it tends to show the people who overanalyze. But a lot of time, so those 2 characters end up staying for a long time in the same spot, hoping and wishing that the cheese will just come back, kind of feeling sorry for themselves. And him remains there, and Ha eventually learns that he can overcome. And I think he's kind of the protagonist in the story. We kind of follow Ha as he learns to overcome and deal with obstacles that come in life. And the cheese is in a lot of ways a metaphor for whatever it is that's important for you. So maybe it's your career, maybe it's relationships, maybe it's goals that you have financially or fitness or whatever it is. The cheese is the thing you're after. And sometimes obstacles come in the way. And I think 2020 and even the start of 2021 are great examples.
It's like 2020 2.0.
That's right.
Or 1.0 or whatever you want to call it.
But are great examples of you can easily get comfortable, and then that comfort can be totally taken away from you. You can get locked in a rut and think life will always be this way. My cheese will always be in the same place, and it's going to be the same kind of cheese, and not realize that life can change quickly around you. And this book is a book about different ways people react to change and how to overcome obstacles in your life.
So I feel the audience and you and I are basically the first part of the book, right? Because before you get to the story, the author has this section called The Gathering. And in this section, there's a high school reunion happening, right? And they're all talking and everybody's talking about, where they've been, what they're doing, typical high school reunion stuff. Did you ever go to your high school reunion?
I never did. And I actually was on the ASB, so I might have been one of the ones that was supposed to organize that.
Yeah,
but
I never went to mine.
Yeah, I left.
Oh, I don't think there was one. I don't know what's going on.
I left my hometown and I never looked back because that place was terrible. So
I left my hometown, but I go back. But there's a lot of places I don't go back to, So it was interesting because there's a section here as they're all talking to each other. So there's the captain of the football team, and he's kind of talking about how he's scared of certain changes, and people are telling the captain of the football team, wait, you were the captain of the football team. How are you scared of change? And so they try to sum up everything that's happening amongst everyone. And the author says, everyone was trying to cope with the unexpected changes that were happening to them in recent years. And most admitted that they did not know a good way to handle them. Right. So I see the purpose of our podcast here is to share this level up review of this story to help not only all of you, but help us ourselves. I mean, I had to actually, be retrospective about my life and what I've been doing. And I read this book, I want to say 4 years ago. It was given to me by one of my administrators that was above me. And he was a business guy. He came over from the business world and he kept giving me business books. And this was, I think, the first book he gave me. Just because we were trying to make moves where we were. And there were a lot of people that were resistant to those moves. And I was kind of resistant. He said, just read this story. And it completely changed my life. And now I'm reading it again. And this completely applicable to me as a full-time reseller. It'll be applicable to you as a part-time reseller. And as Mike said, this can be anything. This could be a marriage thing. This could be, whatever, sports thing, whatever you are trying to move forward and be successful in. And so I found the very definition of each of the characters. It's like you see yourself in each of these. At least I did, right? At different points in my life, or even now,
or even different types of cheese. Like some cheese you might be sniff, and others you might be haw, right? Like whether or not you're willing to move or stay. So just a quick breakdown on the characters. So Sniff and Scurry are the two mice, and in a lot of ways, I almost felt like they were the same. The minor difference in them was Sniff was very proactive in always checking what was going on and seeing and noticing the changes in the environment.
Sniffing it out.
Yeah, sniffing it out. Scurry was the one that was willing to take action, was ready to go right away. And then Him was the one that's very obstinate, not willing to change. Haw was the one that was obstinate to start with, but eventually decided that, had to kind of branch out and learn to overcome.
So the story begins with all of them knew about this cheese at Station C. So they go to Station C, the cheese is there, and the cheese is consistently there. And there's a maze, but they no longer need to go into the maze because they know where the cheese is. So they actually now move where they're living next to the cheese station. The two mice, Scurry and Sniff, Sniff and Scurry. Okay, I keep messing them up. They used to wear jogging shoes to go, right? And they used to actually have them over their neck in case they needed to take off and run through the maze. And now they don't carry them around their neck anymore laced up because they don't feel the need to wear them. Because
Him and Haw don't.
Is it Him and Haw?
Him and Haw don't, but the mice keep the shoes always. They always have them ready to go.
Okay, sorry. Yep. My bad. See? Okay. So anyways, everybody is stationed in one place. Right? They're not moving. They're getting this cheese. And it's interesting. I like one of the quotes here that Hem says. Hem says, "We deserve this cheese. We certainly had to work long and hard enough to find it." And then the author later on says, after a while, Hem's and Haw's confidence grew into the arrogance of success. Soon they became so comfortable, they didn't even notice what was happening. And I started thinking about this, whether, specifically to reselling, right? There was a time when things were so easy for me where I lived. There was a store literally half a mile down, and I could just go to that store every single day. I didn't need to source anywhere. I didn't need to do local deals. I didn't need to do retail arbitrage. If I just sourced that store every day, I could probably go to that store 2 to 3 times a day, and I would have been fine. Now, I wasn't doing that, but there was a time I went to that store 7 days a week, and I was good with it. I didn't see the need to go to other stores. Now, I went to other stores just here and there just to say, hey, maybe there's something else. But I didn't notice that over time, it kept getting worse and it kept getting worse. Management changed. Prices started going up. There was less good inventory to pick up. And then over time, luckily I was like Sniff and I saw it coming because I'm like, hey, certain management has left. Certain prices have gone up. It's just different stuff that's coming in. I think it's time for me to branch out. And then I started doing local deals and I started going into bulk buys and I started switching up what I was doing as far as eBay goes. Right. But I could have very easily just been, this is all I need. I could be successful here. I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. And the arrogance could have set in.
Yeah. And I even like that part of almost like the entitlement. Right. And I do think that people who are successful, real successful people, 99% of the time had to work extremely hard to get there. It wasn't given to them. And so it is true that you've had to work for the success that you have. However, you can easily get this entitlement of, I deserve this. And that almost leads to a feeling of, so it's impossible for it to be taken away from me. But the reality is life can happen in so many different ways. Nobody expected COVID the way it came. And like you said, management can change at a business and anything can happen. You can have a health issue come up and all of a sudden the things you used to do, you can't do anymore. And so the entitlement and the problem is that leads to a feeling of sometimes like a victimhood of, woe is me. Life has happened. I've been dealt a bad hand. I've worked so hard and the things that I worked for were taken away from me. And then you can get stuck in that spot where you're not willing to move on. In fact, at one point, him, when he's there, once the cheese is taken away, they go one morning, there's no cheese there. And in fact, him and Haas stop going as early. They start going later and later in the day because it's like, I know the cheese is going to be there. They stop working as hard for it because they get that entitlement feeling. Whereas Sniff and Scurry always get there early in the morning. They never change that routine. And the morning they get there and it's gone, they instantly lace their shoes back up and take off into the maze looking for more cheese. When him and Ha get there, they're confused. They're looking around. And at one point, him actually writes on the wall, the more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it. Right. Of like, I'm not leaving this. Like, this is my cheese. I'm not going anywhere else. And that was his mentality. This cheese was so important to him that he was unwilling to even consider the possibility even after it's taken away. And I'm sure you've, in your own life, I've experienced this, or people in your life where something tragic happens to them. Maybe they lose a job, maybe they a terrible relationship or something like that. But they almost refuse to face the reality. They almost refuse to say, this has happened, now what? Instead, they kind of stay in that for a long period of time of like, no, I need this back. I need this back.
So it's kind of interesting how the story hits hard right away, right? Because this is unsettling if you are him and Ha, right? Here's what I'll say. It's very easy to fall into that pattern and it's very hard to see that you need to get out of that pattern. Right. And so at the end of, it's not the end of the chapter, but halfway through that story, it says, finally he put his hands. So he's talking here about him. Finally, he put his hands on his hips. His face turned red and he screamed at the top of his voice, "It's not fair." And you see this in every avenue. I mean, I can't tell you, when I was an administrator and even as a teacher, there were teachers that just wanted to do the same thing that they were doing when they got out of college. And when new, requirements were put in place, when there were new learning methods that were being taught, when administrators say, hey, we want you to diversify the way you're teaching, we want you to do this, blah, blah, man, those people, to the end, it is not fair, right? I went to college, I have my degrees. Who are you to tell me what to do? It's the same thing in reselling. All you have to do in reselling is go to YouTube video comments. Or you can go to certain, digital publications and you go to the comments of resellers on there and you will find that it's not fair mentality. You can go down that rabbit hole. It does not take much. You can go on Reddit and you can find it. I mean, there's so many places and it's very easy to get into it's not fair. But as we learned in the story, him and Ha end up in this state of it's not fair. And eventually they become emaciated. There's no cheese. They keep hoping for the cheese to show up and they just keep saying it's due to us. And it never shows up. And so they began, and the book says they ranted and raved at the injustice of it all. Haas started to get depressed. What would happen if the cheese wasn't there tomorrow? He had made future plans based on this cheese. The little people couldn't believe it. How could this happen? No one had warned them. It wasn't right. It's not the way things were supposed to be. Him and Ha went home that night hungry and discouraged. But before he left, Ha wrote on the wall, and this is what Mike had referred to before, the more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it. And I understand that. Like, who doesn't get nostalgic? Who doesn't say, I remember the good old days when I used to be able to blah, 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 blah. And it was so easy. I did A and C, and I always got, well, is it C? Is that what?
A and B, and I got C.
Right? Or 2 + 2 is 4, right? And so Hem goes, why should we change? We're little people. We're special. This sort of thing should not happen to us. Or if it does, we should at least get some benefits. And then Ha goes, why should we get benefits? And then Hem goes, because we're entitled. And I really believe, and again, I am not out there saying, hey, everyone outside of me needs to listen to this. I've been in this place where I'm like, no, things need to be this way. I work too hard. I don't need to change. And I really, the older I get, the more I see, whether it's in a marriage, whether it's in a parent-child relationship, whether it's in your career, in your business, like that mentality, it doesn't benefit anybody, right? And it didn't benefit them, right? So they just hung out. But eventually, right, they began to kind of discuss amongst themselves, right?
Yeah. So him is like I said earlier, the obstinate one. He's not going to move. He doesn't want to leave. But Haas starts to go through this crisis, this internal kind of crisis where he's like, I get it. I'm frustrated. I'm angry too. But then he starts to think, Sniff and Scurry, they haven't come back. And they have these dialogues back and forth, like maybe we should go out there. And him is very adamant. No, we don't want to. Remember how hard it was in the maze? Sometimes you'd find some cheese around a corner. Sometimes you'd get lost in a back alley somewhere. And this is kind of that part where it connects to life, that the unknown is scary. That there's order and chaos in the life. And we want to have order as much as we can. But the world outside of our bubble, of the little part that we have ordered, is chaos. It's chaotic. And when you start to venture out there, there's dangerous things out there. There's things that can hurt you emotionally, financially, physically, and they don't want to go out, do that again. But Ha recognizes, yeah, it was dangerous and it was hard, but at least sometimes we found some cheese, and maybe there's another station. Maybe we'll find more. And it takes a while, but
hey, let me interrupt you for a moment. You know what I thought was interesting was the delusion that sets in with Hem. Because what ends up happening, Hem actually says, if we just work harder, we'll find that nothing has really changed that much. The cheese is probably nearby. Maybe they just hid it behind the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, that is delusion.
Yeah,
right
they even try breaking down the wall. And here's the thing. So that it seems so silly when you're reading a story like this, an allegory, sometimes it's purposefully over the top. It's like, well, that's obnoxious. Nobody talks like that. Nobody acts like that. But when you really think about it, in so many areas we do. I've done that in areas of my life. Like you mentioned, even with schooling, right? Or business, somebody says, hey, we need to try this new technology. We need to try this new website. We should try, instead of selling our product here, we should try. And you're going to have people on your team, or maybe you are that person on the team that's like, no, there's not, like, we're making money. Things are fine the way they are now. Why should we have to change? Well, yeah, we're making money now, but the industry is changing. And if we don't start changing with it in the next 10 years, we're going to be out of date, or maybe even 5 years. No, we're doing fine the way we are. And they don't want to change. And when you think about it, that is that mentality of it's working. Everything is fine. Maybe if we just keep working harder, even though the world's changing around us, we'll be fine on our own. And
they'll come around. Things will come back to how they were. Yeah. Right. And that's what I was going to, delusion hits, right? You fight so hard that you're like, if I just keep doing this, you know what? No, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen, and it's not going to happen. Right. And I remember reading that going, wow. And I see that a lot, even in this last time, of COVID. I mean, we thought about, there are certain businesses that adapted, right? Certain businesses decided, hey, we're going to do something different. And then others were like, no, things are going to be back. We're just going to keep doing what we're going to keep doing. I was listening to the radio the other day, and they were talking about, they were trying to get, I think, some Chinese food, and they were looking at restaurants. And one restaurant, they went on there and they found that they had DoorDash and Uber Eats and whatever, Postmates and all those set up. And this other restaurant didn't have any of those delivery services. They didn't even have a website. They had nothing. And they said that they parked somewhere and they noticed these two stores. And for every one person that went into the store that had no website, had nothing, there was 8 to 10 people going to the other store within that same amount of time. Right. And so that's what separated those businesses. Right. They decided, hey, we're going to make this change. It's uncomfortable. It's scary. Right. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I know it sounds weird, but, having people deliver your food, you're actually trusting that, your product is kind of like us with the post office right now. We're still in this, we trust that the post office, by the way, packages still aren't making it. We're going to trust that the post office is going to deliver our items to us, but you got to adapt, right? You got to make changes. So I thought that story I thought was really interesting because it's very easy. And I know, we're a reselling podcast, but I think it's very easy in reselling to go I just need to keep sourcing the same stuff. My problem is I'm just not listing enough. And you know what? The problem might be that, or it could be that you're just still trying to sell the same things you were selling 5 years ago. And you can list all day and you're not going to sell it. Right. And I've had to come to that realization with some items in this past year too. So just something to think about.
Yeah. And for those of you who sell on Amazon, Amazon is one of those big crazy mazes, I feel like, where your cheese can get moved at any time. And so the book like this is going to help you realize that when they gate something or when your account gets changed or they change their policies, you can quickly get to a place where you are frustrated, you're upset, and you're not willing to adapt, and you lose that as a source of revenue. Or you can say, well, they've changed the API score I have to have, or they changed this, and so I need to adapt with it. And sometimes going out into that maze is scary, and it's not a guarantee. One thing that one of the little pushbacks I have about this book, and we haven't quite got to that point yet, but there's almost an idea of no matter what, if you accept change and you believe in it hard enough, like things will work out better. And I don't think that's always the case. And I think the point of the maze, which I didn't think was harped on enough, was there's actually a lot of danger out there that when something bad happens, you lose your job, you have a health crisis, you lose a marriage, you lose something really bad happens. There's not guarantee that it's going to get better. But one of the things that Ha says that I thought was really important, he ends up writing a lot of things on the wall as he kind of has these revelations. One of the things he says is if you do not change, you can become extinct. Mm-hmm. And what I think was great about that is he realizes I might not find cheese out there. I might get lost in the maze. Things might not work out well for me. But if I stay where I'm at right now, it's for sure not going to work out for me because there's no cheese here. And so sometimes you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to do things that are a little bit more dangerous, going and looking for a new job, trying a new path in life, trying to change how you're sourcing, using a new program, whatever it ends up being, changing the way you deal with relationships in your life. Because if you don't, you are going to lose, right? You're already lost. And I think it's easier when you're already at that place. But the benefit of being a sniff is you can sniff out when it's happening and adapt before you've already lost. A person like him and Ha have kind of already lost. They're at a place where their business has pretty much already failed. And now they're almost starting over and having to figure life out again. But as he realizes that if you don't change, you can become extinct, he also realizes that he asks this question, what would you do if you're not afraid?
Yeah, and what I like here is that, Ha eventually comes to this realization. He says he decided that if he ever got the chance again, he would get out of his comfort zone and adapt to change sooner, right? So finally, he's seen the light, things are changing. And he says, it says that he had a weak smile and he thought better late than never. And I think better late than never is better than never.
Yeah.
Right. And I got to tell you, in my own life, there's been so many times where I'm like, I wish I learned this in my 20s. I wish I learned this in my 30s. I say it all the time right now. I'm 41.
I wish I bought Bitcoin a few months ago.
Don't even go. I was thinking of that directly because in March, Bitcoin was at 5,000, right? And I'm still not there. Is it better late than never? I don't know. I don't know if I'm willing to drop 41K right now, but
you can buy partial Bitcoin.
I know you could. I know, but. And whatever things, right? And that's scary to me. Bitcoin is still scary to me.
It's a maze, right? That's part of the maze, right? Like
I know.
Maybe, and that's a big thing too with like currency. Like it's a different form. People aren't used to the idea of cryptocurrency, and not saying that is the right thing, but it's easy to get to a place where you say reject, reject, reject. And you could be right. It could fail. And you could say, I'm glad I didn't waste my time and energy on it. But one of the things, like with the beginning, when we started this podcast, we used to quote Gary Vee a lot. And, one of the things that he would talk about is, being an early adapter on things, being willing to try new things, because maybe that platform that you spend some time learning and trying flops, but if it doesn't and it takes off, you're there, you're ready to go. And so kind of being willing to try and adapt. And that doesn't mean you have to adapt with everything. You can't be the master of everything, but you can be a jack of all trades and a master of one or two, right? That is actually something you can do. And so you can know a little bit and try things. And when Ha gets to the place where he says, he actually ends up laughing kind of to himself at how foolish and silly it was to stay in section C for so long of the maze, was, I might as well go out there. This has been crazy. And even as he starts to make his way into the maze, he has tons of fears, and lots of times he thinks, am I making the right choice? Should I have stayed? And those are the types of things that you're going to feel when you try something new. And trying something new sometimes is preemptive. It's a preemptive strike of saying, well, things are going okay now, but I want to maybe try some other stuff also. But maybe it's a necessity, and you're reacting to a failed relationship. You're reacting to a loss of a job. You're reacting to the COVID craziness. You're reacting to the way you used to source is no longer possible, and you have to react. And sometimes you almost have to laugh and say, well, here we go. I'm going into the unknown and I'm going to do the best I can. And I love that idea of what would you do if you're not afraid? And it kind of reminds me of, maybe it was 4-Hour Work Week. Maybe it was another one that we did, but he talked about kind of actually writing out what's the worst case scenario that could happen.
4-Hour Work Week, yeah. We're going to talk about that here in a moment.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, in a little bit.
Let's do it.
Stay tuned. But before we do that, I think it's time for us to talk about our sponsors real quick.
Yeah.
So, hey, real quick. It's funny because half the audience, or maybe half, is like, oh, it's awesome, keep doing it. There's some guys that have actually taken Skull Shaver and shaven their head, and there's others like, man, why do we have to listen to this? But hey, we're here to help you guys out. We're never going to, talk about a product that we do not think is 100% effective and great. So skullshaver.com, we use it on a daily basis. Just used it 40 minutes before I jumped into the studio. Good to go. And that's how Mike and I have our nice dome. So if you're interested in shaving your head, just go to skullshaver.com. Use our promo code PURE. PURE, PURE. You will get a great discount and help us out also. There you go. And also, if you want to help us out in a monetary way, buymeacoffee.com/purehustle. Again, our podcast is always free. There is no paywall to listen to the rest of our podcasts or any of our podcasts at any time. But we also want to be able to do more than our podcast. And a lot of you have helped us out so far, especially when we've been in between sponsors, which we've been in kind of in between sponsors for a little bit now. And so every time one of you signs up for a membership on buymeacoffee.com/purehustle, it helps us out a lot. So less than the cost of coffee for 8 episodes is great, right? So we're talking about $5 a month. So we would love it if you would sign up, buymeacoffee.com/purehustle, and sign up for that yearly membership. All right. Also on social media, we are Pure Hustle Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and why am I blanking here?
Twitter,
we are Pure Hustle Cast, right? Oh, TikTok. How did I forget about TikTok? How did I forget? You can't forget about TikTok. So, and we're still on the social media. No one has banned us yet or anybody, but we're going to keep talking about reselling. No, I'm just joking. It's an interesting time right now, I got to tell you. Hey, also, you can reach out to us and give us a call, 619-738-1170. That's 619-738-1170. You can also shoot us an email, purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. That's purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. And as always, you can leave us reviews. People have actually been leaving us reviews. And you know what's awesome is when people DM us and they're like, hey, we heard you talking about the reviews. We want you to get to 400. I made sure that I wrote a review. So I just want to read one of them real quick because we are grateful. Our hope is to get to 400 here soon. We're at 382. So if just 18 of you right now just went and just hit the 5 stars, we'd be good. Yep. Right? We always like the written ones, though. I'm taking away. So the last 2 we had a few. Wow. I was going to read I thought we only had 2. Okay. So I'm just going to pick 2 out here.
All right.
My apologies. But want to thank you guys for, just sharing with everyone.
Have you pre-read them Are you going to end up reading one that's like Mike and Orlando are the worst?
No.
Don't listen to them.
We don't get. I mean, we don't get a lot of hate, so I'm okay with that. So, I'm gonna read this. The first one says "Addicted." 5 stars from the Retail Rabbit. It's a legit name. Retail Rabbit said, hosts are perfect balance of entertaining and informative. They seem like professional on-air personalities as they stay on topic, keep it timely, I just ruined the whole professional on-air personalities. Have consistent segmented topics, don't have much dead air time, and actually have professional sounding audio instead of others who sound like they record on their phones while in the bathroom. Great show. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right. Thanks so much, Retail Rabbit. All right. This is from DDDEEBBEE.
That's a good name.
All right. Cool dudes who know their and S with an ellipsis after. Stuff. That's what I think they're referring to.
Okay.
5 stars. This is my hands down favorite podcast about reselling. I love that their focus is on eBay, but they also sprinkle in info about other platforms. They are humble and share their mistakes as well as their successes so everyone can learn from them. Also, the week segment is my favorite because it helps me finding my niche. And their book reviews are amazing. I'm currently reading Rich Dad Poor Dad because of these 2 cool dudes. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Nice. Oh, man.
It's a good feeling.
It is. I'm always grateful for the reviews. And again, the level up reviews. Like this book, I thought about this book, right? When I posted on Instagram, I'm like, people are going to look at this and go like, who moved my cheese? The story about 2 mice and little people. Like who's going to care? But if it helps you and impacts you, we're all for it.
That's right.
Right. Remember in the beginning, I was kind of like, I don't know if we should do these.
Yeah. And I'm kind of glad we've kept them more like business focused because, man, I was ready to say like, man, let's do some literature. Let's review some literature and talk about how, the postmodern worldview has affected reselling. I'm okay with that. But this is more applicable, I think.
Okay. All right. So, that came out of nowhere. Hey, maybe we'll have a literature hour. Maybe that'll be one of our exclusives.
Let us know if you're interested.
So, hey, I got history I could bring in too. All right. Anyways, let's get back on topic since that's what, people said in the review. So we're back to Hem and Haw, and Haw is finally getting the courage and saying, hey, it's time for me to venture out. Right. And so one thing that Haw does though here, which I appreciate, it says whenever he started to get discouraged, he reminded himself that what he was doing, as uncomfortable as it was at the moment, what was in reality much better than staying in the cheeseless situation, right? Staying in the cheeseless. So he's saying, hey, it's better for me to be out here than be somewhere where nothing is happening, where I'm not getting any cheese. He was taking control rather than simply letting things happen to him. Then he reminded himself, if Sniff and Scurry could move on, so could he. Right. And there's a little bit of social media here. And I want to talk about this for a moment. So, right. If Haw had just surrounded himself with Hem the entire time, he would have been nowhere. Probably would have died. All right, let's be real about it. I mean, these are mice without cheese. No, they're little people.
Yeah.
Anyways, they need to eat.
But technically, the cheese is not food. But yeah. But
it was saying that they were getting weaker and emaciated. Yeah. Like it wasn't good. But they had good examples ahead of them with Sniff and Scurry, and it moved him or her. I don't know what Scurry is, but moved Scurry to go, hey, maybe not. It moved Haw to go, hey, maybe Sniff and Scurry are onto something. Right. And it's the same thing with social media. Like you got to be careful who you follow, who you listen to, the YouTube you watch, the podcast you listen to, the books you read. I mean, in every avenue of life, not only in reselling, but just in everything you do. Right. Because it's very easy to be among people that think the same way you do. And especially if you're negative, you can always find negative people. Right. But if you surround yourself with individuals that have been able to branch out, to make changes, to adapt, to say, you know what, I'm not going to stay here. It's going to end up encouraging you to do more. And so I strongly encourage you, I'm not saying follow Piero's podcast. I mean, hopefully we never become those negative people. So yeah. I don't know. Negativity is just a bad place to be. But find those individuals that encourage you to do more. Okay, that's my diatribe. Sorry. All right, moving on. What'd you think about this comment? I put a question mark because I wanted your thoughts on this. So one of the things that Haw had noticed as he finally was leaving he noticed that the cheese that they were eating was actually like moldy, right? And it was smelling bad. And then he wrote this on the wall. He said, smell the cheese often so you know when it is getting old.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's great. I think that's one of the things that Sniff would do. And the idea here, and later in the book, and I don't think we're going to go into like 100% detail into the post conversation. We might talk about a little bit of the things, how it applies to business. But one of the things that I think was a great example was one of the ladies reflecting on this story, talked about a relationship and basically said like a stale like marriage or relationship she had. And another person jumped to, oh, so maybe you need to find new cheese and you need to like leave that relationship. And the retort was, well, maybe it's been my attitude. Maybe the cheese,
the behavior change that needed to happen.
So maybe the change in cheese is not necessarily that I need to find a new relationship, but I need to change the way I'm thinking about my relationship. I need to change the way I'm interacting. Because sometimes you can get, and I think people do this, and I think relationships and jobs are very similar in the sense that you get very complacent. You can start to feel like, you know, you can take things for granted. Oh, it's this way. I can kind of take it a little easy. Things are good. And before you know it, something can go really wrong. And it's like, wait a minute, how did it all fall apart? And then when you start to reflect and think back, it's like, oh, the warning signs were there. Like I wasn't giving as much attention. We didn't talk as much as we used to. I wasn't putting as much hours into work. I wasn't, doing these things. I wasn't following up on emails like I used to because I got complacent where I was at. And then it all falls apart. So sometimes you need to take I think that smelling the cheese is that self-reflection of how are things really going? And the cheese doesn't always have to change in the sense of, do I need a new relationship? Do I need a new job? Which it might be, but it might be, do I need to change my attitude here? Am I putting in my best? When I first got this job, I mean, think about the first time, if you work a 9 to 5 and you've been out of work for a while and you finally get a pretty good job and it's day one, you're smiling, you're happy, you're there early, you lay your clothes out the night before to make sure you've got the right outfit. You're in there, you're double checking your emails before you send them. And after you've been there a few years, you're gossiping in the break room, you're complaining about how terrible the job is and the management did this.
The honeymoon is over, right?
Right. And it happens in relationships, it happens with reselling. And you can get to a place where your attitude has changed and you can say, wait a minute, where did the gratitude go? And so sometimes it might be that you need a new job or the relationship is fixable or whatever the scenario is. But a lot of times it's because your behavior, you've got that entitlement and you haven't really been smelling the cheese. Is this really what it used to be, or have I changed?
And it runs a little bit contrary to like hustle culture. I mean, we are a Pure Hustle podcast, okay? Yeah. And I'm all about that hustle, like hustle, 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 hustle. Now, if things are going well, keep hustling. But the hustle is not going to get you the success, right? The hustle can quickly get you somewhere as long as you're hustling right. But just hustle isn't enough. And I think we got to be really careful about that, because I'll admit myself, I mean, I think the first year of being a full-time reseller, I hustled like crazy. But I remember looking back on that year and I lost so much opportunity for more money, because instead of slowing down and going, maybe I shouldn't source this, or maybe I need to do this, or maybe I need to hire somebody out. Maybe I need to, spend less time here and spend more time here. I just kept hustling, thinking that, hey, it's all going to be good as long as I keep hustling. What would have been better is for me to slow down, self-reflect, take a look at, my inventory, my methods, what I was doing. I probably would have been in a better place by now. And so you got to be careful, because it's very easy to go, I'm just going to outwork everybody. And as long as I outwork everybody, I'm going to be fine. But if you're outworking and you're doing the wrong stuff, it's not going to help you. It's kind of like, I remember when I was teaching, I'd have students all the time. I would say, I studied for that test for 8 hours and I still didn't get an A. And I would always tell them, I'm like, all right, let me see your study guide. Okay, you studied the wrong stuff. So you might have spent 8 hours, but the test that you took is not what you should have, is not the same thing as what you studied. So no matter, you could have studied and memorized everything word for word, you still would have failed. Right? So the key thing is, it's all good to hustle, but you got to make sure you're doing it right. So now, this is the part here that where I'm in the same boat with you. So there's, and again, I'm not here to stir anything up, but there's discussion about, hey, the more clearly he saw the image of himself enjoying the new cheese, talking about the more real and believable it became. He could sense that he was going to find it. Right. So we can go into two worlds in this one. We can go into the world that it's kind of like this Stephen Covey thing of you have to have the end in mind, right? You have to be able to see what you're trying to do, right? And there's other theories like Think and Grow Rich where like you got to manifest. So Mike and I don't land on the manifest part, right? But we definitely do believe that you need to be able to see where you're aiming at, what you're trying to do. And I could tell you multiple times in my life, especially when I was moving up in my education career, I could see myself, hey, I'm going to be a department chair. It's awesome. I could see what I could be doing. I'm going to be an administrator. I remember being able to see, not manifest, but see that and know what I needed to do to get there.
Yeah, because a proper vision helps you understand the steps, right? When you can look at something and say, if I want to become a millionaire, I need to make X amount of money each week. And I need to reduce the amount of, like, you can have actual steps. If I want to get 6-pack abs, I need to do X amount of exercise hours per week, and I need to eat so many calories. Like, you can break down steps, but just visualizing it doesn't make it happen. You can't just say like, oh, I'm seeing it, I'm believing it, it's going to happen. And that might be a straw man in some ways of the manifest thinking, but there are a lot of, thoughts of like, well, if you just think that like you're going to be successful, it eventually the world will bring it to you. But I definitely think you need to have an idea of where you're going and how to get there, because otherwise you're going to wander aimlessly. So I do think visualizing in one sense is very helpful. I mean, people talk about it in sports all the time. When it comes to shooting a free throw, like I've seen myself shooting this free throw thousands of times under pressure. People are there. It's the clock is ticking down, and it's this point makes all the difference. And I've already felt that pressure, and I think that's good because successful people a lot of times have already, I think I heard David Goggins talking about this, that you've already lived in the anguish in your mind over and over, not just the success of like, I've got the trophy and everybody loves me, but like the hours of practice it's going to take. You've already lived that in your mind, even before you get to, like, if you're running a marathon, you've already thought about mile 20, it's going to hurt and I'm going to want to quit. And I'm gonna make it through, and it's gonna hurt. So it's not just visualizing the end, but it's visualizing the steps that it's gonna take to get there.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I had in my mind thought about, okay, this is what it's gonna look like when I do this, but that wasn't enough, right? I mean, we could daydream all day. I mean, there's plenty of people that daydream their lives away, right? But you gotta take the actionable steps to get there. All right, now, I thought it was interesting here. And, you had talked about this with Tim Ferriss and For Our Work Week. And actually, Grant Cardone talks about that in his 10X book. And I think a lot of our books refer to this. The idea that, it's never as bad as you imagine it, right? And Ha starts realizing this, right? As he's going into the maze, right? He was scared. He was timid. And it says, Ha realized again, as he had once before, that what you're afraid of is never as bad as what you imagine. The fear you let build up in your mind is worse than the situation that actually exists. And it is so, so true.
Most of the time.
99% of the time.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think you have to be aware of that. I'm a realist, so I think that you can think things like worst case scenario is this, and worst case scenario can be much worse than you ever imagined. And that's part of life. And I think you can get through that, and you can even through that find new cheese and make your life meaningful and important and happy. But most of the time we're wrong, right? Like every time you do an argument with somebody, you ever like are frustrated with somebody or something happens and you argue with them in your head for hours before you actually have the confrontation. And then, most of the time that confrontation is way easier than you thought it'd be. You leave your boss's office and you're like, all right, like it was like, he didn't say all the things that I practice. Like I practice, I'm going to respond like this, and he's going to say this, then I'm going to, we worst case scenario everything. Well, and then if I go on this trip, then my house might burn down, and then I'll lose my job, and then this will happen. And most of the time that stuff never happens. And then I love that 4-hour work week. If it's like, okay, let's say all that stuff happens. Now what? Well, I guess I'd start over, and it's like, all right, well, there you go. You got a plan of worst case scenario. So
I remember my first year full time doing Q4. And I dropped, 120K. I don't know. It was some obnoxious number. And I remember it was September and October. So I already had a lot of debt from Toys R Us liquidating. So I bought a ton of stuff at Toys R Us. And then I had all the stuff I was buying. And It was I'd been through Q4s, but I never went through a Q4 full time. And there's just a different feel when you go full time. Like it's scarier, right? Because, when you're part time, hey, I can always go back to my job. I can bounce back. So I remember dropping obscene, to me at that time, it was an obscene amount of money. And I did everything right. I did my research. I checked the ranking. I knew the scarcity, everything. And I remember at one point going, okay, well, I think I'm going to end up homeless. I had these thoughts. I remember actually, so I was meeting with a therapist at the time, going through a lot of, family stuff. And I remember telling my therapist going, yeah, I think I'm going to end up homeless. Like, I think I'm going to have $120,000 debt. I'm not going to recoup that money. It was a scary time because before that, I maybe had dropped 5,000 at some point, 10,000, but 120K, like to rebound from that could be pretty scary. And yeah, and sure enough, November came around, December, and it was all paid up. I was in the profit. Things were good. And ever since that Q4, I never looked back. Like I'm never scared to drop major amounts of money in reselling because as long as I, did everything right, for the most part, you'll win. Now, I have lost. Not going to say that it's always a win, but it is very true because your mind is your worst enemy. Like when it comes to I can't tell you how many scenarios I ran through my head. Okay, what am I going to do when I'm all in this debt? How am I going to pay this off? Like what's going to happen to Puro's podcast? Like this is actually the first time I've talked about this in the sense that, this is the very beginning of Puro's podcast. And I kept thinking, all right, what if we do a podcast about reselling and 6 months in, I have to do a podcast and go, sorry guys, but you know what? There's no point in doing a podcast anymore because the reality is we can't live up to what we're about, right? We're poor with money. We don't know how to make money. Sorry, we're out, right? But that didn't happen.
Yeah, that would have been real.
that would have been the realest ever podcast. But no, instead, it was all in my head.
Yeah.
It was all in my head. I did everything right and it worked out. And yeah, did I lose a little bit here? Yeah, but I won so much more. So
it's like WebMDing symptoms you have.
Oh my goodness. Don't even go there.
Right. Like
especially right now, it's the worst.
Yeah. I mean, it's so easy how like a little itch or a headache can turn into a tumor or, something like that when you start WebMDing. And it's true. You might have something worse all the time. It happens where people go in and they didn't think they really had anything and it's terminal. But most of the time people have more worry than is good for them because they worry, and then it leads into nothing. But worrying actually causes all kinds of physiological changes to your body. It stresses your body and it has a negative impact on your health. And we can worry about what if this happens? What if this happens with politics? What if this happens in our country? What if this happens with our jobs? What if jobs don't come back? What if the economy crashes? What if everything, but it's not going to change anything. I'm a firm believer of we need to be cautious. We need to be aware. Don't live with your head in the sand and take the steps that you can take and the things you can control. But you can't worry about what you can't worry about, right? Tomorrow has enough worries for itself.
Yeah, agreed. And so, and I'm not telling people to go out there and spend $100,000, but what I'm telling is, hey.
Yeah, I'm specifically telling people don't do that unless you absolutely know what you're doing.
Yeah, agreed. But that's entrepreneurship. It's taking those risks. It's willing to, because they mentioned here earlier on that when you stop being afraid, you actually start feeling good because you begin to build confidence. And that confidence, I think, drives you to do more. So now, there is a section here which I thought was kind of interesting. So now Ha, is out there and he's still reflecting and he's noticing that, hey, I wish we saw this coming earlier, right? We already talked about this earlier, but I got to tell you, you're right about early adapters. Like I see that in reselling all the time. You'll hear somebody say something like in a social media post or on a YouTube and no one's paying attention. Then like a year later, you're like, oh, should have paid attention, right? Yep. I think about that with like sports cards. Like Gary Vee was talking about sports cards, I don't know, a year and a half ago, like way back. And I didn't take him up on it because I was like, I don't know. So, but I also wasn't that interested either. But again, if you're able to catch things early, it's a very good thing. Now, as things changed, right? Ha is eventually he's looking, and he's trying to find a new cheese, and eventually he does find it, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of a long, drawn out thing, and there's little lessons he learns throughout the way. I think this is his time in the maze. I mean, maybe it's purposely long in order to show that sometimes success doesn't come right away. It's not like you leave one cheese and automatically find success the next one, because there's times where he doesn't find anything. There's times where he finds crumbs. There's times where he finds crumbs leading into a big chamber, but the chamber is empty. And each time he's got hope. But again, he's learning little lessons along the way. Like the quicker you let go of your old cheese, the sooner you find new cheese, right? Like he learns that lesson. The one you mentioned, it's safer to search in the maze than remain cheeseless situation, right? So he's learning these things as he go. He's learning about dealing with fear, not holding on to the old cheese, and changing what you believe. And yeah, eventually he gets to a place. Are we going to move all the way there where he gets to, spoiler alert, he finds Sniff and Scurry, and there's cheese. There's new, and actually at one point before we get there, now that I've spoiled it, I think
we spoiled it in the first 5 minutes.
He finds at one point he finds some crumbs of cheese, and he brings it back or he finds like a small little cache of cheese, and he brings some back to him, and he says, "Look, I found some new cheese. It's different. It tastes different."
This is crazy.
And him is like, "Nope, don't want it. I don't even want to try your new cheese. I want my old cheese. I probably wouldn't even like the new cheese." And again, you can hear something like that and go, "Well, that's obnoxious. Why would anybody do that?" But again, think about it. How many times I've seen this happen in businesses, that I've been a part of, where somebody mentioned something in a staff meeting, somebody mentioned something at a conference. "We should try this new thing." No, that wouldn't work. They go out and they try a little bit. "Hey, look, I tested it. I did this, and there's been a little bit of success. And we've already had a little bit of, nope, don't want anything to do with it." And they shut it down because the way we do it works. We don't want to change. We've got our way of doing it. I've seen it time and time again. And there's been times where I've probably been that him, where people come and say, "Hey, things are I know you think things are working, but they're actually worse than you realize. Or maybe you realize they're bad, but I've gotten a solution." And I've maybe said, "Nah, I'm good. Like, I don't want that. I know how to do it." And so him is kind of a lost cause at this point. He's shown he's not willing to move. And yeah, eventually Ha finds the new cheese. And when he finds the new cheese, my favorite part of it is that Sniff and Scurry are there, and they're nice and fat. Like, they've pumped up. They've been there for a while.
They've been living it up. So it's interesting because when he shows up, he doesn't settle. That's what I enjoyed. So, he at first it was like, we're entitled, we deserve this cheese, right? And then eventually Ha began to see, maybe there's more out there. Sniff and Scurry are out there. I'm afraid. And then it changed to, I'm not afraid anymore. And then, kind of like Home Alone status. And then move from there and ended up going out, and now self-reflection, right? These are kind of all the steps that apply to anything, especially when, right now when we're talking about change. And then eventually lands and goes to Station N and finds all the cheese and finds Sniff and Scurry. But it's important, what he says here, very important. He says, well, he doesn't say, the author says this about him. He says, he had to admit that the biggest inhibitor to change lies within yourself, and that nothing gets better until you change. Right? So you can ask for all the circumstances to change. You can hope that this will happen, or this will happen, or this will happen. But in the end, it has to be you that makes that change, that decides that, hey, I'm going to have a different perspective about what I'm doing. And then Ha applies it and takes it to the next level. And Ha, perhaps most importantly, according to the author, realize that there's always new cheese out there, whether you recognize it at the time or not, and that you're rewarded with it when you go past your fear and enjoy the adventure. And I thought that was super important because we've talked about that before, that I forget which book it was, but if you've had a rough life, or if you've gone through a lot of transition and a lot of change, right, you recognize that there's always the ability to rebound, right? There's new cheese out there, and in whatever scenario you're in. And this reminded me in my own life, like there's plenty of cheese, like, recently, I love reselling. I'm gonna keep doing reselling, but I've had to adapt. I've had to find new ways to find my cheese, right? There's just so many ways to make things happen. The key thing is, are you willing to let that change within you to be able to adapt?
No, it's great. And I love that when he shows up, when he takes his running sneakers off, he ties them around his neck, just like Sniff and Scurry. And again, that's kind of symbolic of, I recognize this isn't permanent. I recognize that I might need to adapt.
Yeah, he didn't put them away.
Yeah.
He held on to them still.
Didn't settle in, and he ends up writing. And along the way, as he's learning these lessons, he's writing them on the wall. And I think it's kind of, one, to remind himself, two, it's a feature of, so that the author can show us these lessons that we need to be learning. And then also, if him ever decides to leave, he's going to find it. And eventually him might make it to Station Inn and it's empty. But all of these rules are there, and realize there was once cheese here. And if I would have come, so now I need to get out there and find this new cheese. And one of the things that I thought was most practical at the end of the book, they end up talking again. These friends meet all together after reading this story on their own or hearing the story. They end up meeting back together and discussing it. And one of them talks about business. And he says, we presented this because in our own business, we were kind of failing. We were flopping and there were issues. And so we quickly learned who the Sniffs, the Scurries, the Hims, and the Haws were, and we utilized each one of them in transition. So in our company, we found our Sniffs and said, hey, we need your help finding ways that we can improve, finding ways that the culture around us is adapting. One example they gave in another situation, another lady was talking about, she worked for an encyclopedia company and they were told, hey, you should digitalize this, put this on CDs. Nope, we're going to hardbound. That's all we're doing. And their business pretty much failed because the world changed around them. And so the Sniffs in your life, or times when you're a Sniff, or in your company or your team, and you might not always be a Sniff, right? You might be a Scurry. The Sniffs are the ones that are out finding, hey, I found this new platform. I found this new strategy. I found this new, and they're willing to look for, hey, this isn't working in our company. The Scurries are the ones that say, great, you've got this new platform. I'm going to go learn how to use it and I'm going to do it and I'm going to make it work. They're the ones, the action takers. The Haws in your company are the ones that are going to say, I don't know, like this is really hard.
A little overanalyze.
Yeah. And you got to kind of coach them along and convince them that it's the right thing. And then they said, well, what do you do with the Hims? And it was, well, some of the Hims after enough coaching turned into Haws and learned. And the other ones we had to let go. Yeah. Because our company needed to, because we did not read this in time. We didn't adapt in time. And eventually we became okay, but we had to do what was best for our company. And if they weren't willing to see our new vision, if they weren't willing to see our new, and sometimes as a team leader, sometimes in your own life, even as your family, like at least once a year, sometimes every 6 months or so, my family, my wife and I get together and we kind of draw up what's our cheese, right? What is our plan this year? What is our plan for the next 5 years? What are we hoping to get? And that vision kind of guides the decisions we make. And sometimes it changes. Sometimes it's, hey, we really wanted to do this thing, but now maybe just moving into a fifth wheel is actually a better plan for our life. And instead of this other plan we had. And so your goals will change. The cheese will change. And you need to sometimes force yourself to be a Sniff or find those Scurries in your life that you can surround yourself with. And worst case, be that Haw that learns, even if it's painfully, that you can overcome, but don't be a Him. Don't, because you're going to become extinct.
And just remember, Haw is constantly going out to the maze still. Does not settle. Continues to say, hey, I'm going to adapt whatever change comes our way. And with that being said, hopefully this book applies to you and allows you to make the changes that you need to make happen. Make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling. Blades.
Peace.